me that I should be there. I know nothing about Kelantan. I'm actually from Kelantan. It's hours away from Kelantan. How many hours? 5 hours? 4? 3? How fast you drive? 3 or 4. He says it's 5 or 6. Okay, so I arrived there, and it was nothing like I imagined it to be. I thought I'm going to get all these weird looks like, hey, why is this non-Muslim coming to this place like, some cafe fellow walking in, But that was not the case at all. I totally enjoyed my time in Kelantan. Just in Kota Baru, it's just walking around and minding my own business, And then many years later, I had the chance to go back to Kelantan again to do a series of documentaries. Going around talking to people and really understanding their identity, the things that they do in their pastimes, the food that they eat, the places that they go, visiting temples, visiting all these Siamese temples. How many of us know that the number of Siamese temples in Kelantan alone is pretty amazing? The largest sleeping Buddha in Southeast Asia is in Kelantan. I don't know why they would build the largest sleeping Buddha, but since they like to build and build. So from Kelantan, let's go to this one state that we don't really talk about. I think that all of us, we have some sort of idea of what is the identity of certain states. When we talk about Penang, we immediately think, good food, wow, Penang damn nice, a lot of food, this and that. Talk about Malacca, hey, must go here, must go there. But what about Negeri Sembilan? Anyone here from Negeri Sembilan? My God, road, yeah. Is it a state? Negeri Sembilan is a state, yes. Actually, my mom is from Negeri Sembilan, so I'm probably half Negeri Sembilan. Yeah. Oh, you have cousins and you also? Oh, your mom is from Negeri Sembilan. Okay. So Negeri Sembilan used to have 9 districts, but now only got 7 now. So Negeri Sembilan is very different, right? What I really like about Negeri Sembilan is adat berbakti. Negeri Sembilan is the only state where they have this tradition. And this tradition, adat berbakti, plays such a big role in how the communities there function. Very, very big. Okay? It's to the point where they live by this saying, biar nanti anak, jangan nanti adat. That's the most important thing. Adat is extremely important. So, we can look at Negeri Sembilan and say, these are all Muslims. But if you talk to them, you ask them, right, they do not brand themselves with a certain brand of Islam. They do not hold up a flag and say, oh, this is me, I want to defend Islam, I want to do this, I want to do that. But they will do everything that they can to defend their adat. So this really shows that it's a very different function that religion plays. So, sitting here in KL, we fall into the trap of generalizing people. We talk about Islam and then we assume that everybody practices Islam just the same way. Everybody holds Islam as number 1 priority. But that's not the case at all. You go to Kelantan, it's different. And then you go to Negeri Sembilan, it's different again. Right? And then we move on to Johor. Johor is famous for what? Sorry?
Otak-otak.
Asam pedas dan otak-otak. Iskandar Development Region. Legoland. Okay, I don't know how this contributes to their identity.
Northern Singapore.
Yeah, north of Singapore. That's how the world remembers Malaysia actually. Johor Sultan. Actually, that was the point that I wanted to bring across, but he said it, not me. So, in Johor, one of the documentaries that I did in Johor, that I shot in Johor, was actually the performance of Kuda Kepang. Right? So, when we go to Istana Budaya or whatever parade that the government is organizing, right, they usually have this Kuda Kepang performance, right? You see a bunch of people just walking around with this outline of a kuda, right, between their feet, and they will do this dance and all that. Let me tell you that Kuda Kepang is nothing like that. Not at all. So I documented this group of people, this troop, Kuda Kepang troop, and they were all Javanese. They're all from this place called Parit Raja. And this whole kampung is full of parit. You drive around, it's just parit after parit. So they will identify their houses according to this parit. It's like, hey, where do you live? Like, oh, this parit, a very big one, but you know, a cow died inside there. Like, ah, yeah, I know where's your house. You know? So if you go and ask these people, yes, they are all Muslims, you know, but they're very proud to declare that they are Javanese first. They're not Malaysians. You know. They will readily tell you, no, we will never be Malaysians. We will always maintain our identity as Javanese. So what do we do when we come across situations like that? Then we ask them, hey, you got my card or not? Yeah, got. The whole kampung, everybody got my card. But they're Javanese first. They're not Malaysian. But they're also Muslim. So, do they see our brand of fighting for Islam, at least the things that they see in KL? Do they share that sentiment? I don't think so. Right? For them, religion does play a part in developing the identity, but these cultural markers that they have is drawn upon these ancient traditions. Same with Negeri Sembilan, ancient traditions. So while they do embrace Islam, they don't look at it as something that overrides everything else. Like once you embrace a certain religion, you know, everything else, throw everything out of the window. That's not the case at all. And the same with Kelantan. When we go and look at stuff like Wayang Kulit, for example, the most popular craft, performance that come from Kelantan. Who are the people that go to Kelantan and tell them, hey, Wayang Kulit got all these Hindu elements and all that, you cannot perform this way, you got to change it, you got to do this and do that. Not the state government, you know. It's the federal government. So the federal government goes all the way there, starts telling them, hey, you cannot do this, you cannot do that. You know why? Because you're a Muslim. And then they will say like, what does this have to do with me being a Muslim? This is my culture. This is a craft. A craft that has survived so many generations. Why should I change it? Just because you are telling me that this is the brand of this religion. I don't think it's ever written in the Holy Scripture that you can't do this, related to Wayang Kulit. So these are all interpretations, right? And I think it is a problem when you have the federal government coming in and telling people specifically, you cannot do this, you cannot do that, right? After Johor, I just came back from the Philippines. I was documenting what was going on in the aftermath of the typhoon, the Typhoon Yolanda. So I was based in Ormoc and Tacloban. 90% of the Filipinos are Catholics. But in places like Ormoc, I dare say that it's about 99.9%. Right? Can't remember if Amma mentioned earlier that one of the long-term research that I'm working on is actually the study of Datuk Gong. Right? So Datuk Gong is actually a cult. It's a cult that's practiced here in Malaysia. You might not be familiar with the name, but you've definitely seen it before. It's all these little red shrines that you see by the roadside, under the tree, in the temple, and all that, right? So this is a spirit that is called Datuk Gong. So wherever I go, I try to look for traces of this kind of beliefs. This thing that falls under agama lain-lain. Because it's too small for us to say it's a major impact on national identity. It's so small, like, hey, who knows about all these kind of things? So I went to Ormoc and I found one Chinese temple. It was built at the 4th story of a Chinese school, the only Chinese school there. So naturally I had to go. Went there, tried to speak to the people. I expected everyone to be Chinese. I only found four. And I found out that the population of the Chinese in the Philippines is 40 people max. And they're all mostly older people. So I spoke to the president of the Chinese chamber there in Ormoc, right? So he was the caretaker of the temple. It was a very unique experience for me, going to the temple and get to see Hong Kong and Guan Yin here in the Philippines. Hey, I recognize this, I recognize this. It looked exactly like the Chinese temple that you find here. Right? So I was curious how does the Chinese identity, right, survive in a place like this, where there is a majority of Catholics. So I spoke to this old man, I think he's about 60. His grandfather was the first person who came to Ormoc from China. So his grandfather brought along all his beliefs, right? So along the way, as the generation went from one after the other, they did continue their practices. They still saw that these certain things represent them as being Chinese. But along the way, they discarded a lot of these practices. They still celebrate Chinese New Year. But that's about it. Oh yeah, I forgot, they play mahjong. So he has these partners, like 3 of them. He plays with 3 other people, because you need 4 people to play mahjong. Right? Unfortunately, one of them, an old man, just passed away. So now he got nobody to play mahjong with. So I asked him, what is the future of Chinese identity here in Ormoc? Not really Philippines, just in Ormoc. And he says he's dead. Gone. He is the last Chinese in Ormoc. And he completed that sentence by saying that he is now a Filipino. He says, no more Chinese really. We came as Chinese, but now we are Filipinos. And we are proud to be so. So I said, what about the religion? You bring all these gods and all that, like, what are you going to do with it? Says, it's a dead thing. People are no longer coming to pray. Most of the new Chinese that are being born, they have converted to Catholicism. So they have adopted a whole new culture. So here we can see an example of how that has actually died off. Chinese identity has died off there. Because it's a minority. Right? Which actually brings me to my next point, which is about smaller religions. Right? When we talk about religion in Malaysia, we like to talk about, number 1, majority Islam. Number 2, what's the number 2 religion in Malaysia? What's the number 2? Come on guys, what's the number 2 religion? My coffee is on my head, you can answer right. No. Number 2 is Buddhism. Number 3 is Christianity. And then we have agama lain-lain. All these small religions that we don't really know how to classify. Right? Do you notice it? Do you see a trend here? That we are classifying religion in the same way that we are classifying race. We look at Malay, Indian, Chinese, don't bother, all these small things, you know. So, while we are labeling and categorizing all these things, race and religion, we are actually subtly destroying, assassinating all these other things. Because they are no longer important. They don't contribute to the majority, you know. So when we look at things like Datuk Gong, the worship of Datuk Gong, the worship of Datuk Gong cannot be included under Buddhism, under Islam, Taoism, nothing. It's entirely on its own because it's spirit worship, it's paganism. So, what sort of importance do we play on the smaller religions? And then we ask ourselves, is there freedom of religion or not in this country? I personally know of many Malays who are more than happy to embrace a religion apart from Islam. But they can't do so. They can only say in private. They come and tell me like, actually I really like Hinduism. I think that's the religion for me. But there's nothing that I can do about it. So how does, we look at people like this, how can we say that Islam plays a very big role in the shaping of their identity? Right? And we must remember that in adapting or in professing a particular religion, we subscribe to certain limitations or restrictions, or I would say guidance that are imposed upon by this particular religion. Okay? So that is one way of how religion shapes the identity of a certain community. Say, if you have 100 people professing Islam, then you have these limitations imposed on them. We can't do this, we can't do that, because it is part of my religion. The second way that religion actually influences is that how we react to the things that other people can do. So if Muslims cannot consume pork, how do we see Muslims engaging or reacting towards other people who can eat pork in this country? Is there religious tolerance? Is there inclusivity in this country? I just wrote about that on my blog. How inclusive are we? How much do we know about other people's religions? How much do we know about Christianity and how it is practiced here? How much do we know about Islam? What we know is stuff that we read from the media, stuff that we hear from people. Hey, you know my friend like this, like that, hey, Muslims, they cannot do this, they cannot do that. But how far do we go out to actually clarify all these things? How much effort do we put? So which is why I was saying earlier, we have to ask ourselves, how does our religion, how does your religion mold your national identity? So the third part that I'm going to go into, before that, just a brief mention that Anas earlier mentioned about ISMA. ISMA recently wrote an article on their website. They wrote about Datuk, and they were making a big hoo-ha about Datuk being insulting to Muslims. Right? This was one of my biggest fears when I started researching Datuk. There are a lot of materials that I'm reluctant to publish online because of the retaliation that I was afraid that I would receive. People will come to my doorstep with pitchfork and I don't do what to me. But when they published this article, actually it started out I think with another Terengganu Daily or something like that online. They posted this image of two idols, right? So because Datuk Kong is basically regarded as most commonly a Malay Muslim spirit, right? So the idols are fashioned in that way as well. Malay man dressed in Malay costume with the kopiah, So these people, they try to make a big fuss out of it. They say like, hey, how can they insult Islam like this? We must rise up against these people. And I thought, oh crap, this is it lah. Next they're going to come after me lah, because I'm doing research on this like that lah. But then I read through the comments, and this surprised me. Everyone who commented, they were lambasting this news portal for saying, what nonsense is this? Why are you making a big fuss out of this? This thing has been around for ages in Malaysia. There's nothing insulting about it. And there were many Muslims who were posting. And they posted writing two things. One, they were curious. They themselves were asking, hey, what is this? I heard before about this Datuk, like, can you tell me what it is? And then people who were knowledgeable went up and said, they explained, like this is so and so, this. And they said, oh, now I understand. Okay. And then there were also people who said, oh, this is, this looks wrong, but then we shouldn't jump to conclusions. We shouldn't just simply, get angry over things. This would not be the way a proper Muslim should behave. So that gave me a lot of confidence. I looked at the comments like, hey, you know what? We think that people are so sensitive about this, that Muslims in Malaysia are so sensitive, but actually, it's just a small group of people, This group of Ibrahim Ali and all these other people, right? It's just this small group, But you know who gives them power? We always like to blame the media. We like to say the media is the one that gives power. Right? It's wrong. It's actually us. We are giving them power. You know how we're giving them power? Because we keep commenting, we keep reading, and we keep sharing these articles. And when we do that, you are putting value to what Ibrahim Ali has to say. Think about that. Everyone gets in a fit. Like, oh, how can you say like this? How can you say like that? This is wrong. I want to share. For the media company, right, who puts these articles out, they are just clapping their hands like, yeah, man, share. Like, that's what we want. We want readership, we want viewership. And we are helping them. Therefore, we are giving value for people to talk nonsense in this country, you know. We are essentially, right, giving an incentive. Brian Ali, you know. Think about that for one moment. The power of the media lies not with the people in the media, but with you, people who consume the media. If you read these articles and then you just ignore it, then there is no longer any power to it. But the more you feed it, the fight will grow, right? And that is a danger. The last point I'd like to make is Malaysian identity, right? Just yesterday I was at one of the forum. It was the Gabungan Tindak something forum, GBM forum. Right? One of the things that I've noticed with the panelists who were speaking at the forum is we all have this sort of idea of what the Malaysian identity is. And we sometimes we like to blame the government. We like to look at the government and say, yeah, you know, because of the government, this kind of racial discrimination, because of this, because of policies and this and that, that's why we are divided. But then again, I notice a trend among all these panelists that they themselves cannot decide among themselves what is the Malaysian identity. Everybody is talking like, cannot, racism is bad, this and that, but can anyone offer a solution to Malaysians for what the Malaysian identity really entails? What does it really mean? And I would like to offer my approach to it. Okay, you don't have to subscribe to it or anything, but this is my approach to it. My approach is to completely dismantle ethnicity in Malaysia. And the way I approach it is, I'm not an Indian. Stop referring to me as an Indian. My great-grandfather was an Indian. My grandfather was an Indian. But my father is a Malaysian. I am a Malaysian. Now, does this mean that Malaysian is an ethnicity? Am I saying that we should create a new label called Malaysian? I don't think so. Until the day we die, we have these things within our genes, if at all it's traceable to say that I'm Indian. But what I'm saying is that we have a choice. Our identity in this country is a choice. Okay? Now, how do we look at it as a choice is this? Each of us, we are born with certain cultural traditions. We are born into families with, let's say we take a look at the Chinese family. Chinese family is born with certain practices, like this is how we live as a Chinese, this is what we celebrate, and everything, right? But in Malaysia, we have all sorts of celebrations. You can pick and choose. If I'm not mistaken, our calendar year is the most flavorful calendar year in the world. Full of holidays. It's just full of public holidays, and we don't know most of it.
When do you ever work?
Sorry?
When do you ever work?
I don't think we do. That's why things are not working in Malaysia. No one ever works. Everybody's just looking at, hey, when's the next holiday? To the point where we look at the calendar and we see like, hey, July, no public holiday. Not nice in July.
Do we have some sort of work and holiday visa in Malaysia? Do we?
No, I've been in the UK for 30 years.
Yeah.
And when I look back at Malaysia, and I think all these public holidays, and I say, when do these people ever work? And you call the British lazy.
That's my point. We should basically suggest this to the Malaysian Tourism Agency that they should start some sort of work and holiday visa for non-Malaysians because we have lots of holidays.
Work holiday is very simple. Just come to Malaysia, it's holiday. So, when we look at this, right, my approach is this. I believe that every Malaysian in this country has equal stake on all of these public holidays. Whatever culture that you see around you, you have an equal stake in it. You look at something, let's say you look at something and you call it, this is Malay culture. Yes, it is. It was of Malay origin, but now it's yours. Do what you want with it. Same with Indian culture. Yeah, all these things, brought by some people to Malaya. It bears some similarity, some resemblance to what you see in India, but now it's Malaysia with it. You can do what you want with it. So it's about embracing other people's culture as well. It's not being afraid that all these things will disappear. Now when I say that we dismantle this ethnicity, this labeling, and we adopt something else. Now I'm not saying that you go out there and purposely discard things. You don't have to go to your parents and tell, I'm not going to do all this anymore. I'm no longer Chinese, I'm Malaysian. Embrace that. Embrace that as Malaysian culture. Go to a Hari Raya open house and feel welcome and go there and say, this is my culture, this is my public holiday. I'm going to celebrate Hari Raya. At least that was the environment that I grew up in. I grew up celebrating all this. And today, in fact, I look forward to Chinese New Year. Not Deepavali. Even though I still look forward to Deepavali. But this is how I think we can move forward. And this is to me what the Malaysian identity means. It's about embracing everything without putting particular labels. Because as long as we put labels on things, right? Labels have a way of influencing the way that we behave, the way that we react to things, and the way that we speak about things. Can you imagine a day that we talk about things that are that draw its origins from other cultures, Indian things and all that, without referring to it as something external, right? Say for example, a Chinese family, they want to cook Indian food, right? There's nothing out of the ordinary about that, you know? Nothing at all. It's your culture. For an Indian family to cook Chinese food, you know your culture, what? Like, what's so luar biasa about it? Nothing at all. Okay? So, like what I normally do when we go out and fill up forms, I would never mark any of the Malay, Indian, Chinese. I would refuse. I would mark line. And then they ask you to write in, what's that line? So just write in Malaysian now. What can they say? I've had many people, they look at me, then they say, you cannot write that. You have to choose Indian. I say, no, I don't want. What are you going to do about it? I cannot. And they will get pissed off, but that is my choice. So, stop waiting for the government to do everything. Stop waiting for the government to change things in such a way that you can look at what the government does and then say, now the government has enacted this law, everything will be alright, no more racial problems in this country. There's no such thing. Change starts with you. That's the most important thing. It starts with you. Dismantle it. Dismantle whatever racism that you have within you. And that is how we move forward. You know, really, don't wait for other people to do things. And I want to close this off by readdressing that question, how does religion play about Malaysian identity, in creating Malaysian identity. My take on it is this: I do not want religion to play a role in creating the Malaysian identity. I think that religion needs to be downgraded in all the things that we are discussing. Religion is a personal thing. Don't shove it down other people's throats. Whatever religion you want to profess, be it Islam, you want to go and pray to Datuk Gong or anything, it's really up to you. Keep it within yourselves. You want to share it with your friends, with your loved ones, right? By all means, go ahead, do so. But do not impose it onto others. Do not expect other people to change their ways to accommodate you. That's not how it works. So I really think that I really do not want, I'm very afraid of us talking about religion and the Malaysian identity. I don't want it to be related, you know. Because the way I look at it, my forecast is a very grim forecast. Remember how I talked about other religions, major religions, gobbling up smaller religions, right? One example I give you is the Datuk Gong worship. Datuk Gong worship is something very unique that I'm looking at because it has changed hands from different communities. It started out with the locals, with the Malay natives. Islam came, then decided, oh, cannot pray already. So give it to other people lah. So basically the Chinese have adopted it. And over the years, even with the Chinese, we actually see Taoism now adopting it. Even if the official stand of Taoism now is that Datuk Gong worship is not part of it, they're slowly being absorbed into it because of this conscious attempt by the Chinese who are practicing this to fit in. They want to fit in. I think everybody, like Taoism is very big among the Chinese, so have to like fit in somehow, right? So just like how big companies are buying up small companies, absorbing them, the same thing is happening with the religions in Malaysia. At this point, close to 70% of our population are Malays. And you could say that in order to be a Malay, you have to be a Muslim. 70%, close to 70% are going to be Muslims. Honestly, the way I look at it is, it's just going to get, the pie is going to get bigger. It's going to go to 80%, it's going to go to 90%. So do we want religion to play such a big role? Not for me. Thanks.
Wow, thank you so much, Marvin. I think we are all very Malaysian. We are all very Malaysian when it comes to food and holiday. Yeah. Okay, right. Thank you so much, Marvin. Now we should move on to YB Yin, and she will talk about the history of different religions, and she will also try to define religion, identity of Malaysia from her own point of view, and she will also talk about the enemies of religion when it comes to moral policies and politicians. Please.
My fellow panelists, moderator, and ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Yeah. So, this is apparently, as what I've shared on my Facebook, it's apparently quite boring topics. Like what Amma said, try to keep yourself awake when we are talking about such a boring topic. However, this is such an important topic to our country as a whole. When Stephen asked and invited me to come to this forum, I was like, the role of religion sounds very difficult to say, especially for people from DAP. Alright, now, first of all, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Yobi Yin. I am the Adun for Daman Sarau Dharma. I'm from DAP, and then now serving as a state assemblywoman for Selangor. And it is actually difficult for us to speak, especially religion, especially if you are from DAP. Why? Because we are very vulnerable to attacks by the. I try not to politicize religion. That means to say I try not to put in politics in elements as much as I possibly can. Since I am a politician, I may include a little bit. So I just want you to, forgive me if I include a little bit of politics in my speech later on. And before I go further, you all look at me, I'm like looking at my phone. Just don't think that I'm actually messaging or whatever, because my notes is inside. So I'm just looking at my notes, and then a lot of people every time ask me, how come you always look at your phone? That's because my notes is inside. Apparently, this is one of the forum. I have spoken to thousands and tens of thousands of people, but this is the forum that I feel that I am so afraid to speak. I am so afraid to speak that I prepare all the notes so that I will not be attacked by the Barisan Nasional. I'm sorry to be a bit politicized in their blogs later on, and say DAP is trying to Christianize Malaysia. Alright? Which a lot of people actually believe that. Alright? So, before I go further, I would like to also introduce another part of me. I am a Chinese, and I am a Christian. All right? And a lot of people say, because sometimes I share some scriptures on my Facebook or on my Twitter. A lot of people say, can you not do that? Especially from KP. Those people will tell me that, you know what, those Barisan Nasional people are going to make use of what you share on Facebook and Twitter and attack you for that. But I have my principle is this, is that if I'm a leader and I want to be a leader of my future, I should behave like what it is like in the future, of which I am free to proclaim my belief openly to anybody, and you have the right to profess your faith openly as well. So if I want to profess my faith, and if I want to be the leader of the future, I should not be fearful of sharing my faith on Facebook. And at the same time, I will not discourage other people from sharing a different faith on their Facebook. So later on, I probably are going to include some scriptures on my speech. I hope you are not offensive, because this will be the future where everybody is free to profess their faith and what they believe in. So, as what Rama said, I'm going to tell you a little bit about religion and what is identity and what we as the lawmakers look at this future of our country and religion. How does religion play a role in the future of the country? First of all, I would like to tell you a little bit on the history. Yesterday, or 2 days before, 2 days ago, I brought my nephew to Museum Negara. So I brought him there, and only I realized, oh yeah, I need to talk about this religion on Thursday. And I figured out that, wow, something that I found out. Because we always have the mindset that, Islam came to Malaysia first, and then